The Silent War. The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew it. Commander Zeth Corvain of the Altine Republic pressed his four-fingered hand against the cold metal of his ship's viewport. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always had, but he knew that behind that peaceful darkness, worlds were screaming. In the past 10 years, the Vicari Empire had swept across the galaxy like a plague of shadows. Their bioweapons turned entire planets into graveyards. Their fleets moved faster than any known technology, and their hunger for conquest seemed endless. "Sir, we're receiving another distress call," reported Lieutenant Yara, her blue-scaled skin reflecting the bridge lights. The Saurian officer's voice carried the weight of exhaustion that had become common among all resistance fighters. "It's from the Helix sector. 3 more worlds have gone silent." Zeth closed his eyes. The Helix sector had been home to over 40 billion souls just last month. Now it was probably nothing more than floating debris and poisoned air. The Vicari didn't just conquer worlds. They sterilized them. Their bioweapons were designed to break down the very building blocks of life, turning forests into ash and oceans into acid. "Any word from the evacuation fleets?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir. The last transmission came from Admiral Thex's flagship 3 days ago. They were trying to reach the sanctuary worlds near the galactic rim." The sanctuary worlds. It sounded hopeful, but Zeth knew better. They were the last free systems in the galaxy, protected by an alliance of desperate species who had nowhere left to run. The Altians, the Saurians, the crystalline Nexari, the plant-like Verdani, and dozens of smaller races had all gathered there, hoping their combined fleets could hold back the inevitable. But hope was becoming a rare commodity. "Commander," came another voice from the communications station. "We're picking up something strange. It's a signal from the Sol system." Zeth turned sharply. "That's impossible. Sol went dark 50 years ago." The communications officer, a young Nexari whose crystal body pulsed with nervous energy, manipulated the controls with precision. "I know, sir, but the signal is definitely coming from that direction. It's not on any standard frequency, and the encryption is unlike anything in our databases." Sol, the birthplace of humanity. Everyone in the galaxy knew the story, though few liked to talk about it. The humans had been one of the newer species to achieve interstellar travel, but they had made their mark quickly. They were explorers, traders, diplomats, and when necessary, fierce warriors. They had helped establish the first Galactic Council, had mediated disputes between ancient enemies, and had always been the first to offer aid when disaster struck. Then, 50 years ago, their sun had simply gone out. Not exploded, not collapsed, just went dark, as if someone had thrown a switch. Every ship sent to investigate had found nothing but a cold, lifeless system. No planets, no debris, no signs that humanity had ever existed. It was as if they had been erased from the universe itself. "Patch it through," Zeth ordered. The bridge filled with static, then cleared to reveal a simple message repeating in multiple languages. "Any vessels in distress, proceed to coordinates 247.8 by 183.4. Safe harbor provided. This is humanity's promise." Silence filled the bridge. Yara was the first to speak. "Sir, those coordinates are near the old Sol system." "Humanity's promise," whispered the Nexari officer. "But they're extinct. Everyone knows that." Zeth stared at the message scrolling across his screens. Something about it felt different from the usual trap signals the Vicari sometimes used. There was something honest about it, something that reminded him of the old stories his grandfather used to tell about the humans and their strange habit of keeping their word no matter the cost. "Sir," Yara continued, "we're also receiving reports of a massive refugee convoy under attack in that sector. Over 300 ships, mostly civilians fleeing the Vicari advance in the outer spiral." 300 ships, millions of lives. Zeth made his decision. "Set course for those coordinates. Maximum speed." "But sir, if it's a trap?" Then we'll die fighting, same as anywhere else. But if there's even a chance that someone is offering genuine help." He paused, looking out at the stars again. "We have to try." The journey to the coordinates took 18 hours, and with each passing moment, the distress calls from the refugee convoy grew more desperate. The Valkyrie had found them, and their bioweapon ships were closing in. By the time Zeth's ship arrived at the designated coordinates, he expected to find nothing but floating corpses and poison debris. Instead, he found something impossible. The refugee convoy was there, all 300 ships, but they were no longer under attack. Surrounding them, in a protective formation, were dozens of ships unlike anything Zeth had ever seen. They were sleek and silver, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in metal. Their energy signatures were completely unfamiliar, and they moved with a grace that defied conventional physics. And floating at the center of the formation was a ship that took Zeth's breath away. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of his own vessel, but it didn't look like a warship. Instead of the angular, aggressive designs favored by most military species, this ship looked almost peaceful. Its hull was a warm, golden color that seemed to glow with its own inner light, and along its sides were symbols that looked almost like written words in a language he didn't recognize. "Commander," Yara breathed, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from those ships, but they're not weapons. It's like they're generating some kind of field around the entire convoy." As if responding to her words, a new voice came over the communication system. It was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Terra's Promise. Unknown ship, please identify yourself and state your intentions." Zeth's hands trembled as he reached for the communication controls. "This is Commander Zeth Corvain of the Altine Republic. Captain Chen, we thought. Everyone thought humanity was extinct." There was a pause, and when the human captain spoke again, her voice carried a weight of sadness. "We let them think that. Sometimes you have to disappear to do the most good. Commander, we've been monitoring the situation in your galaxy. We know about the Valkyrie, and we know what they've done to your worlds. Then you know we're losing. The bioweapons, the speed of their conquest. We can't fight them." "No, you can't. Not the way you've been trying." The human's voice grew stronger. "But there are other ways to fight. Ways that require patience, sacrifice, and hope. Commander, how many of your people are willing to trust us?" Zeth looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Altians, Saurians, Nexari, even a few Verdani whose flowering heads swayed with nervous energy. All of them were looking at him with the same desperate hope he felt building in his own chest. "All of them, Captain. All of us." "Good. Then prepare your ship for jump to hyperspace. We have something to show you. Something we've been preparing for 50 years. But I need you to understand. What you're about to see must remain secret until we're ready. The Valkyrie think humanity is dead, and that gives us an advantage we can't afford to lose." "What kind of advantage?" Captain Chen's reply sent chills down Zeth's spine. "The kind that comes from being underestimated. The kind that comes from having time to plan while your enemies think they've already won. Commander, humanity didn't die 50 years ago. We just went dark so we could get to work." As the Terra's Promise began to move, its golden hull gleaming against the stars, Zeth realized that everything was about to change. The galaxy had spent 50 years mourning humanity's loss, but it seemed humanity had spent those same 50 years preparing for this moment. The war against the Valkyrie was far from over, but for the first time in years, Zeth allowed himself to feel something he had almost forgotten: hope. The jump to hyperspace felt different with the human ships leading the way. Their technology was unlike anything in the current galactic database, smoother and more efficient than even the most advanced Nexari crystal drives. As they traveled through the folded space between stars, Zeth found himself studying the readings from the Terra's Promise with growing amazement. "Commander," his chief engineer reported, "I'm not even sure how their ships are staying together in hyperspace. The energy patterns are completely stable, more stable than anything we've ever achieved. And the protective field around the convoy, still active. Whatever they're doing, it's keeping the refugee ships safe from hyperspace stress without any visible effort. Sir, I've been an engineer for 30 years, and I've never seen technology like this. Zeth nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. If humanity had indeed survived, if they had spent 50 years developing new technologies while the rest of the galaxy fought and fell to the Vekari, then perhaps there was still a chance. Perhaps the war could be won after all. But as the human ships led them deeper into unknown space, Zeth couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to discover just how much the galaxy had changed while everyone thought they were watching. The truth about humanity's disappearance was about to be revealed, and with it, the last hope for a galaxy on the brink of extinction. The promise kept. When they dropped out of hyperspace, Zeth Corvain forgot how to breathe. Before them stretched a sight that defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. Where the Sol system should have been nothing but cold, empty space, there was instead a thriving civilization, unlike anything he had ever imagined. Massive space habitats rotated slowly in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming with cities that sparkled like captured starlight. Asteroid mining stations operated with mechanical precision, while streams of ships moved between installations in carefully orchestrated patterns. And at the center of it all, where Earth's sun should have been, was something that made Zeth's mind struggle to comprehend what he was seeing. It wasn't a star, but it gave off light and warmth like one. It was artificial, clearly constructed, and it pulsed with a gentle rhythm that seemed almost alive. Around it, in perfect orbit, were dozens of worlds. Not planets, but constructed spheres covered in blue oceans and green continents. "My ancestors' spirits," whispered Yara, her scaled hands pressed against the viewport. "They didn't just survive. They built a new home." Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system, and now Zeth could hear the pride in it. "Welcome to New Sol, Commander. What you're seeing is 50 years of human determination, ingenuity, and hope." "But how?" Zeth managed to ask. "The reports said your sun just went dark. Ships were sent to investigate." "The ships found exactly what we wanted them to find," Chen replied. "Nothing. We had about 6 months' warning before the original crisis hit. Our scientists detected signs that our sun was becoming unstable, not naturally, but because of something the Vekari had done during their first scouting missions to our system." The revelation hit Zeth like a physical blow. The Vekari caused your sun to die. They were testing a new weapon, something designed to destabilize stellar cores. We think they were planning to use it on other systems, but they needed to test it first. They chose Sol because humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. They thought no one would miss us. Zeth felt anger building in his chest, but Chen continued before he could speak. "But we had something they didn't expect: time and the ability to plan. When we realized what was happening, we didn't panic. We didn't run. We made a choice that nearly broke our hearts but saved our future." "What choice?" "We let our sun die. But first, we evacuated everyone and everything we could save. Every human, every animal, every plant, every piece of our history and culture. We loaded it all onto ships and moved it to safe harbor. Then we built cloaking fields around the entire system and went to work." As the Terra's promise led them deeper into the new Sol system, Zeth began to understand the scope of what humanity had accomplished. The artificial sun wasn't just a source of light and heat, it was a masterpiece of engineering that provided clean, unlimited energy. The constructed worlds weren't just places to live, they were carefully designed ecosystems that supported not only human life, but the life of thousands of species from Earth. 50 years, Zeth said, more to himself than to anyone else. "You spent 50 years preparing for this." "We spent 50 years learning," Chen corrected. "Learning about the Vekari, about their weapons, about their weaknesses. We sent unmanned probes throughout the galaxy, gathering intelligence. We studied every battle, every conquest, every defeat. And slowly, we began to understand how to fight them. How? By fighting smarter, not harder. The Vakari's greatest weapon isn't their bioweapons or their fleets, it's fear. They conquer by making their enemies believe that resistance is hopeless. But fear only works if your enemy knows you exist. As they approached one of the larger space habitats, Szeth could see through transparent sections into vast chambers filled with forests, lakes, and cities. Children played in parks while adults worked in laboratories and factories. It was life continuing, thriving, growing stronger in the face of adversity. "We've been preparing for this day since we first went dark," Chen continued. "We knew the Vakari would eventually sweep across the galaxy. We knew the other species would fight bravely, but ultimately fail. And we knew that when the moment was right, when hope was nearly gone, we would emerge to turn the tide. And you think this is that moment? Commander, 3 hours ago, we detected a massive Vakari fleet moving toward the sanctuary worlds. Over 2,000 ships, including their primary bioweapon platforms. They intend to end the war by destroying the last resistance stronghold and everyone in it." Szeth's blood went cold. The sanctuary worlds held the last free governments in the galaxy, along with billions of refugees. If they fell, the war would truly be over. "How long do we have?" 18 hours, but that's enough time. Enough time for what? Chen's reply came with absolute confidence. Enough time to keep humanity's promise. The next few hours passed in a blur. Szeth and his crew were transferred to one of the human habitats, where they were introduced to technologies that seemed like magic. The humans had developed cures for the Vakari bioweapons, energy shields that could protect entire fleets, and weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them. But more impressive than the technology was the people. Humans moved with quiet confidence, working together with a coordination that spoke of years of preparation. They welcomed the refugee convoy with genuine warmth, providing food, medical care, and hope to species from across the galaxy. "The thing you have to understand about humans," explained Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist who was briefing Szeth on their bioweapon countermeasures, "is that we're pack animals. When something threatens our pack, we don't just get angry, we get creative. We spent 50 years thinking about how to save not just ourselves, but everyone. Everyone. Every species in the galaxy that wants to live free. That's what this has all been about. Not revenge against the Vakari, but liberation for everyone else." As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began sounding throughout the habitat. Captain Chen's voice echoed through the corridors. "All personnel to stations. The Vakari fleet has been detected approaching the sanctuary worlds. Operation Daybreak is now active." Szeth found himself back on the bridge of the Terra's Promise, standing beside Captain Chen, as she coordinated with what seemed like hundreds of other human ships. Through the viewport, he could see them decloaking one by one, revealing a fleet that rivaled anything the Vakari had ever assembled. "How many ships do you have?" he asked. "Enough," Chen replied simply. Then, speaking into her communication system, "All vessels, this is Terra's promise. Remember, we're not here to destroy. We're here to liberate. Disable their bioweapon systems first, then their engines. Give them a chance to surrender. And if they don't surrender?" Chen looked at him with eyes that held both sadness and determination. "Then we'll do what we have to do to protect the innocent. But we'll give them every chance to choose a different path." The jump to the sanctuary worlds took only minutes with the human fleet's advanced drives. When they arrived, they found the Vakari fleet already in position, preparing to deploy their bioweapons against the helpless worlds below. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons precisely targeting the Vakari bioweapon systems. Energy fields deployed around the sanctuary worlds, protecting them from any contamination. Disabled Vakari ships found themselves surrounded not by enemies seeking revenge, but by humans offering medical aid and safe passage home. "Attention Vakari fleet, Chen broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Terra's Promise. Your bioweapons have been neutralized. Your ships are disabled. But you are not our enemies. You are fellow beings who have chosen a dark path. We offer you the chance to choose differently. The response came from the Valkyrie flagship, the voice of their commander filled with confusion and rage. Impossible. The humans are extinct. You cannot exist. We exist because we chose to hope instead of hate, Chen replied calmly. We exist because we spent 50 years learning how to heal instead of how to destroy. And we exist because we believe that every species, even yours, deserves a chance at redemption. What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. One by one, Valkyrie ships began to lower their weapons. Their crews, many of whom had been conscripted into service by a militaristic government, chose surrender over continued warfare. The war didn't end that day, but it began to end. Over the following months, as humanity shared their technologies and their message of hope with the galaxy, the tide truly turned. Worlds thought lost were reclaimed and healed. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in their shared desire for peace. And at the center of it all was humanity's promise that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to disappear, when to prepare, and when to emerge with open hands instead of closed fists. Standing on the bridge of the Terra's Promise, watching as former enemies worked together to rebuild what had been broken, Zeth Corvain finally understood what it meant to be human. It meant keeping your promises, no matter how impossible they seemed. It meant believing in tomorrow, even when today looked hopeless. It meant never giving up on the idea that the galaxy could be better, and being willing to do whatever it took to make that dream come true. The stars, once again, were filled with hope.